Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick here for the first episode of the season of our new program, Thursday Morning GM, with Vas Larikos of Baltimore Beatdown. Vas, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. Great time of year. Looking forward to the season. Football fan. Florida State's my college team, playing LSU with the national championship implications this weekend coming up, so couldn't be more excited.
All right. Or, of course, the Orioles still rolling along with a 1.5 game lead, too, in the loss column now, so we're happy about that as well. It's a great time to be a Baltimore sports fan. We're very fortunate right now. I'm going to be a man of divided attention, I think, this October, hopefully into November if things go well. So anyway, this show, the intention is to each week of the season look at what the Ravens might need to do from a general manager perspective. And that's what this is. We got a Monday morning quarterback. You can see what we're plugging into with that. You can see what we did. So Vas and I are co-hosts of this show, and we're looking to at what moves are still ahead for the Ravens right now, or what might need to be addressed based on where they are during the season. So obviously a crunch time right now in terms of roster manipulation. The Ravens have announced their practice squad, initial one anyway, yesterday. That changes a lot, just like the roster will. They've announced their initial 53. They have some vested veterans who are still in limbo. They have other vested veterans that they moved to the practice squad already. And they have, of course, a number of young guys there as well. But they still have a fair number of roster moves before opening day.
Yes, just to touch on the practice squad, I thought pretty much everyone they wanted made it through, except for Kyle Blue Kelly and David Sharp. The Sam Mustipher made it, Jeremiah Moon made it, Daryl Worley made it, Josh Rawls made it. So I think they were pretty successful at getting most of the players through. The big question now is who are the players that are going to be going on to the injured reserve that can return later in the season, and who are going to replace them. The rumored players, at least per Jeff Zarebek, are Pepe Williams, who I think everyone expects, Malik Ham, as well as Keaton Mitchell, both of the UDFAs.
Keaton Mitchell expected to go on, and not Humphrey at this point, and not Bowser at this point, which is a more significant one.
So Bowser's on the
He's on
NFI.
NFI.
So he's not even technically on the 53, and he has to sit out 4 weeks minimum. So
okay. Great point.
A little bit of a tough spot there. But they do have some players that I think they'd like to bring back.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we know of the vested veteran crew. You could extend that out to about 6 guys maybe that were in this category. But let's talk through those guys and just how important they are to this team. Sam Mustipher, an offensive lineman who played very well this preseason, actually a very surprising cut to me. I thought that the Ravens would carry 10 offensive linemen, certainly in terms of the initial roster, or at least move him very quickly back to the roster. They've actually practice squatted him at this point, which is an indication he may stay there at least a week into the regular season, be elevated perhaps in week 2, or it may be longer, in point of fact.
Right. I definitely think he put some good tape out there in the preseason and has a lot of experience under his belt. So he would be a player that other teams certainly monitoring if they have an injury at center. I was very happy to have him make it there. But there are some financial incentives to wait a certain period of time so they don't accrue the year, and the salary is not guaranteed throughout the year.
Right. So if they wait till week 2, I believe it's a non-guaranteed week-to-week salary deal for Mustipher. And that may, in fact, be part of what they're thinking for here. He's a vet minimum guy. So the savings is some, but it's not a ton. If it's a bigger deal if you have a guy, and I guess this really never happens because you'd really have to sign the guy to like a $3 million contract, and then you wouldn't have him sitting out for a couple of weeks. It'd be more normal. What they did with Eric Williams a number of years ago, Eric with a K, Williams, the lineman, where they brought him in after week 2 and they paid him something more than the vet minimum. And then they were, going week to week at that price. So
I think the Ravens are the best in the game at manipulating the roster in this way. But it also does come with a cost. but we'll circle back to that. I think maybe after we touch on the players we think they may bring back.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Daryl Worley. He has not been elevated yet, correct? That's my understanding as of now. He probably a good chance he is elevated in the first few weeks, but Worley, a guy they had 18 transactions with last year, whatever the number was. I'm sure it was the record for the franchise because it was just an obscene number. But he is a guy they probably feel will last a week into the season, 2 weeks into the season. They may even go through 3 practice squad elevations of him if it fits into their overall scheme.
I think that's probably likely. I think it depends. They can elevate players, but they can only dress a maximum of, I believe, 47, 46 or 47, 48. Mm-hmm. So you have to be taken into consideration if you're going to who are you not giving a jersey to on Sunday, in addition to the 5 guys that are on the roster, to now give more guys, opportunity.
We should address that. So who are the guys you see as as inactives come this first week, for example?
I would say Salah is likely an inactive. I would say,
how about
Hill is
also.
I think they probably want to. They need to have 8, right?
Right. They need to have 8. And they only have 9 on the roster now.
Right. So I think you can't go too thin there. Perhaps likely if he is not healed in time. Most of the last guy on the depth chart in most position groups are your special teams aces. Wallace, Hill, potentially Ricard could be deactivated, although he does bring something to the team on special teams. And then flipping over to defense again, you're looking at Delshon Phillips, who's just one of the guys you want on special teams. So maybe Trent Simpson is inactive. I think Tavius Robinson would also be inactive. And then maybe Jalen Armour-Davis.
Yeah, Jalen Armour-Davis is a possibility, and I'm trying to think of who else is. You didn't say Ardarius Washington, did you? Because he's the starting slot corner.
No.
Okay. Arthur Mollett, a possibility.
Could be, but he again is another special teams contributor. So there's a lot of these back end of the roster guys competing for those special teams reps and that game day jersey.
Okay. All right, very good. Now, one of the things about safety is they really only have 3 guys right now. Ardarius Washington, he may list as a safety, but he's not going to play there because they need him at slot corner, obviously, which means their only real backup is Stone at this point in the season. Brandon Stevens, another guy, they can't afford to play him at safety. They need to keep him available for outside corner because he's their top backup there. Maybe Humphrey in terms of week 1 is inactive as well if he's not going to play. So you end up with I think it's going to be pretty easy for them to get to 5, honestly. They have at times activated only 4 defensive linemen. I don't think that's a particularly smart move, but it might be something they would do against a team like the Texans. They do run the ball a little bit. You might want to play a little more base defense, but the more base defense you have to play and the more defensive snaps you have to play, the more you really need to have 5 defensive linemen. Yeah,
I'd like to have Brent Urban activated for this game. Houston is going to try to run the ball with Pierce, who's one of the better, up and coming young backs, and offensive line might be the strongest, unit on their team. That's not saying very much because their team's not too great, but with a rookie quarterback, I would definitely expect that. So Brent Urban would be somebody that is going to potentially take the spot of Malik Ham once he goes to IR, short-term IR.
So this was interesting in the Ham thing because you could make the case that he's on the roster to play early in the season, but he's also a valuable replacement later in the season. And obviously the biggest need right now on the Ravens is at Sam linebacker. Well, no, that's probably not true. It's probably still cornerback, but Sam linebacker, enormous problem at this point that they don't have a single player who really fits in how the Ravens have used a Sam linebacker. They had Kyle Van Noy in for a visit. He would have been a guy that would have made sense for the team. I think, I don't know why maybe he wasn't in shape. Maybe the price wasn't right. Could have been.
I heard it was the price. I heard he was asking for 3 to 4 times as much as they ended up signing Clowney for, which was a little surprising. But I was coming off a good year, and he's still available. And I would agree with that. If you're looking at the week 1, Bowser's not available. If you're going to deactivate Robinson, that leaves you with Away, Clowney, and Ojabo, and Harrison to potentially take on some outside linebacker snaps. But if you're looking at what is the thinnest position on the team for week one, at least, you're still 2 deep and even 3 deep, not 3 deep, but 2 deep plus 1 at cornerback at all 3 positions if Seymour is re-added. So I actually feel more comfortable at corner at this point, even assuming Humphrey is not available, than I do at outside backer. And I think it may be worthwhile. If there's one place to add, and I think this is the best, most complete week one roster since 2012, but if there is one place, I would say it is Sam.
Okay. Well, we'll see if there's a player they like. But anyway, getting back to Malik Cam for a second, he dropped back 11 times off the line of scrimmage during the preseason. So they tried him there. They were obviously, among their objectives was trying to see if that could work. Was not targeted in that time, so that's a good sign right off the top. If you've given up a couple receptions, that wouldn't have been terrible either. The other guy, Jeremiah Moon, played some Sam as well, had a PD in coverage. So it's not shocking to me, but maybe if I had to, bet on a little bit of an upset, I would have said Moon would have made the roster initially. He still could be a elevation. A practice squad elevation is a guy that they think maybe can take on some of those same responsibilities. The one thing I can tell you is Clowney is not that guy. We went over this last night, but I did want to make this a numeric thing and not just an assertion, which is important to do. But comparing Clowney and Bowser as two guys who have both played on the edge, and obviously Clowney played in some different defenses, including a 4-3, both I believe in both in Houston and Cleveland, but his total number of coverage sacks in what is now a 9-year career, let me get this right, 116. So he's averaged about 13 coverage snaps per year, while he's had 3,416 pass rush snaps. So about a 30-to-1 relationship between the two. Whereas if you look at Bowser over his career, which is a little shorter, he has had, and I'll get this up in a second here, 555 coverage snaps, but only 1,158 pass rush snaps. So about a 2-to-1 relationship in terms of pass rush to coverage. Those two figures exactly demonstrate how the Ravens require Bowser around to get the flexibility out of the pass rush that they want. When you can drop your Sam linebacker to coverage and feel good about it, and Bowser's the best in the game at doing it, that gives all kinds of options to the defensive coordinator in terms of how they bring that pass rush off the slot, from inside back or from safety, whatever they might want to do. And it's night and day in terms of difference in flexibility. Look at last year. It was when Bowser came back, which happened to also be when they got Roquan Smith, that the defense turned it around.
I was going to make that exact point. Roquan, it was the same time. So especially in the matchups with Cincinnati, where McDonald was really able to sort of get Burrow off of his rhythm, I thought Bowser was the key man that made that a possibility. No question that the team views. Clowney's listed on the roster as a defensive end by the team. So I think that says a lot about how they view him, and that's what he's done throughout his career. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, and they don't really, he's not a 5-tech, so they don't really have a defensive end position for him to play. When he came to the Ravens, Harbaugh said he's an outside linebacker, putting the outside linebacker role. But I think he was practicing with the defensive lineman.
Jihad Ward, I believe Jihad Ward was at 3 years ago. He was listed as a defensive end. And the similar type of, I guess it's a 7-tech, or something like that. So, yeah, the question to me is what's going on at quarterback? If Johnson is required to get past week one, why not put Huntley on IR? I know you only have 8 total, and if you're going to use 3 this week or 4 this week, that limits you. But I don't know. It's just really hard to carry 3 quarterbacks on the 53, I think.
I think what they may be thinking about doing is activate. They may be hoping Huntley is back before week 4 and activating Johnson, using up his practice squad elevations before they put him on the roster. I don't think they'll carry 3 quarterbacks at any point this year in terms of not having one of them on IR. I just don't see that happening. And you can see that they still took Anthony Brown on the practice squad, which to me, he was the only guy who made sense as a developmental quarterback there. It really, I guess you can do it just to have him at practice and whatnot. You can keep Johnson there, but they really want to. I think they want to just maybe they will. Maybe will do it. But the fact that they haven't put him on yet actually tells me they might activate him prior to week 1.
I think so. Either Huntley's ready or he's not. If he's not ready, you can't play a game with only one quarterback on your roster. So at that point, I would potentially take the chance on Huntley. The difference between skill set might be a little bit negligible. So I don't know if you're missing out on that much, value that Huntley would be so much better than Johnson in weeks 2, 3, or 4 if pressed into action.
Yeah,
that's the move I would make personally.
Yeah, and then you multiply that by the probability of Jackson actually getting hurt, and you hope that's low. Yeah, there you go. Because it's boy, would we hate that to happen in an all-in season. You push all your chips in, and this is one of the reasons I hate doing it. Is that when you do it and you have a big injury, you're so much at the mercy of your health in terms of trying to make things work out. Anyway,
the counter to that, and I've thought about that a lot, and I definitely agree with that opinion. However, even if you're in a season like last year where you're not pressed so tight and borrowing void years, and one big injury also derails your season at that point too, if you lose your top guy. So I know you're taking money from next year, so there's a little bit more cost there, but I don't think the injury risk is worse, more impactful on a team built that way.
I don't disagree with the comment, but that would say don't make the move ever. Don't ever heap your talent into 1 year. What I heard was another argument on my side.
So, say it again. Yeah.
So, okay, good. As long as we're on the same page there, that's something. I did want to talk to you a little bit about the composition of the practice squad, and there's a whole nother pod on this, so we don't have to go through it. But I have one generalized problem with the nature of the practice squad. I wanted to get your opinion on it and see if you had any surprises or anything that showed up or anything you'd like to talk about. Why don't you go first? If there's any surprises on the practice squad from your perspective.
It's pretty straightforward. I would have probably kept a different set of receivers, but the big thing as far as numbers per position, I don't necessarily see a need for 2 running backs on the practice squad with 4 on the roster. That would be the one to me. I'd rather maybe give that to an offensive tackle or another defense down lineman.
I'm in the same position with you, and the reason is overlapping with a more general philosophical point is that the 2024 Ravens have an enormous need for fresh incoming talent. There's going to be a huge exodus of free agents, and that practice squad this year, they got 16 spots where they need to devote, in my opinion, more of it to developmental talent. And 2 guys that made complete sense for the roster. Dante Demas would be a guy, if you believe he could be a wide receiver 5 or 6 next year, those positions are going to be open because Odell and Aguilar ain't going to be back. Or if they are, they're at market value, and at least it gives you an option to choose somebody else. Tariq Black obviously would be another guy. Now, none of these guys are world beaters that, you just have to have them. But Dante Demas gives you kind of multiple characteristics that I think we saw in this preseason, including some ability to block and whatnot that I like. Completely on board with you. In fact, that in the point that Melvin Gordon has no space on the roster. You own no stake in Melvin Gordon's future. So if Melvin Gordon either helps you in 2023 or he's worthless to you in terms of a practice squad spot. And I think with 4 deep, I think that's very unlikely. We'd be upset if it happens, certainly. And a guy like Owen Wright, who might develop this year, and sure, it's always possible he might see a game or 2 this year where he's the 4th back and gets 2 carries. But if he does a few things well, all of a sudden he could be Gus Edwards, and then you've got him for 4 years. And that's extreme example, but still, that's what you're hoping for. You don't have that possibility with Gordon.
Yeah, Gordon, he's just over the hill, and he doesn't really offer you much of anything. I can understand the need for a lot of times teams would keep a really speedy back on their practice squad to mimic, quarterbacks when they're practicing and that sort of thing. But Gordon can't do any of that. He's a get what's blocked for you and nothing else kind of guy. And I don't know. I guess the pass protection is what they really like from him.
This is the funniest thing about Gordon that you would bring that up, but we looked at it on the show when we are talking about the practice squad. The worst trend I've ever seen. But take a look, if you've got PFF, bring up Melvin Gordon there and take a look at his pass blocking the last actually every year of his career. And this is actually it's funny, except it's not. He's okay. Let me bring this up because it's just one of the things you got to have here. 2022. Look at pass blocking specific. Okay. So his pass blocking scores since 2015 came into the league as a pretty good pass blocker, 74.0. And I'm just going to use the rating for this. I obviously there's questions about this, but pass blocking rating then 68.8, 56.3, 56.2, 47.0, 41.7, 41.4, 39.9. His pass blocking rating has declined every single year he's been in the league to an unbelievably bad level currently. So it's he's not the guy for that. He's not on the efficient frontier of receiving and pass blocking.
Yeah. So, hopefully they'll find somebody better that they can take from another team. And, I would have liked to keep David Sharp, but didn't quite work out there. It's going to be an evolving process, obviously, with who's on the 53, who's on the practice squad, and all that comes with a cost. I wanted to make this point. Brian McFarland, effective cap space once the rule of 51 is put to bed. And, what do they need for the practice squad elevations plus injury reserve plus in season? They need $8 million from where they are now. I mean, they're essentially at zero right now.
That's an approximation of what they'll need to do in terms of signings and whatnot. Brian has got
I think it's high.
Moderately conservative number, but he's right in the sense that if they have like 4 guys that they're extending their roster with, that's like $4 million effectively it's going to cost. And I think normally the assumption is it might be $4 to $5 million. So maybe he's in the right range. But he's very good. And by the way, love having him on the show whenever he's able to do it. But that seems like a high number. Now they can create that money, but
that's pretty much when, they can do it as needed. It doesn't have to be done ahead of time, but I would not be surprised if either Ronnie Stanley or Marlon Humphrey, who are both over $7 million could be restructured, or Lamar or Mark Andrews, who are 5 and 4, 4.5. If they do pull one of those triggers, pull one of those levers before the season, because according to his effective cap space, they are right up against it right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think they're actually, okay, a little bit of theory. I believe I understand this correctly, is that it only matters if you're restructuring a veteran, if you prematurely restructure a guy who might be cut before the last year of his deal is the only time it matters. So I think they're more likely to restructure Humphrey than they are Stanley. Stanley, I think they've actually resisted it because of the fear that he might either retire or not be healthy enough to go, and then they have a different kind of event they need to deal with at that point. And boy, that's going to be several shows unto its own, is what's the most effective way to replace Stanley when the time comes.
First round draft pick.
It's pretty much what the options are in that case. Boy, if you can get that, if there's any way you can get that problem solved any cheaper than that, it's terrific. But you look what the Ravens traded away Orlando Brown. They weren't going to be able to pay him, for 1 year of service. It was a mid-second round pick for the Chiefs to have him there. So it's a difficult call.
So they're going to have to probably tap into one of those big 4 contracts at some point this season. I would probably, assuming this mystery injury with Mark Andrews is minor, I think he's probably first in line. I don't want to be a fearmonger, but they have $23 million in cap space next year, 11th least in the league. And that's with OTC projecting a jump of $30 million in TV money. And that actually with a slew of UFAs.
Yeah, that does
slew of UFAs.
Begin to address the number of players under contract, which is the real problem, and the talent under contract. Yeah.
So if you're gonna restructure Andrews and take that $4.5 million and put it towards 2013 or 2023, then that $23 million number now is reduced by that much in 24.
Yeah. So it's I guess is there Andrews only have 1 year left on his deal? He has
at least 2, if not 3, at least 2.
So a portion of that, maybe a third of it goes to next year, then a third each to the next 2 years kind of thing. But still, it's every dollar they defer, every dollar they spend in the next few years got to be looked at in a whole, they just went from 1x to 10x on the microscope in terms of how they need to look at it, with Lamar being paid what he is. So difficult.
Absolutely agree.
All right, Voss, always a pleasure to talk football with you. I know we're going to have a great time with this as co-host this year, but tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Sure, I am at Vasilis Beatdown, Vasilis, Beatdown on Twitter/X. Co-managing editor and author for Baltimore Beatdown. Put out an article just this afternoon about how Eric DaCosta is embracing the new win now era in the NFL. And also have another podcast with Yuri called The Ravens Way, records and streams live every Thursday at 9 p.m.
All right, very good. I'll have to give that a try. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open. I'm always looking to talk to new people. This is how I meet new folks. It's how I met Voss originally, and really like to meet new people, do shows with them, discuss a kernel for an idea of a show, and I'll get back to you very quickly if you contact me. I promise you that. Voss, I'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you then. Thank you.
I'll talk to you next time on Film Study.